Hi guys, thank you so much for coming back. I am going to do something a little bit different today. I am going to read a short story from one of my books. The book is Enchantment's Stories of the Month 2010, and this collection is the Bahamian collection. It's 12 stories that involved Bahamian characters. Because I want to read the entire story, I'm going to just jump ahead and begin. This story is New Year, New Rules. I stood apprehensively with the mouthpiece in my hand, which shook just a little. My legs were shaking as well, and I prayed they would be able to hold me up. Considering their size, one would wonder how I could be in fear of not being supported by my legs. My peers had called me Butterball in high school, so I had always stayed home during the Thanksgiving lunch special. My mother, Phyllis, always wrote a note that I was sick. Prom night had been spent on the sofa with my mother, eating a tub of popcorn with extra salt and butter, watching TV. My mother had always been my best ally, and food had always been hers. So naturally, I had taken comfort in what comforted her. Thoughts of prom night or the absence thereof, my alliance with my mother, and the ally that had taken her from me brought tears to my eyes, which threatened to spill over as soon as I opened my mouth to make the announcements for the morning flights. The domestic lounge of the Rocksound International Airport was packed to capacity, which wasn't very much to begin with at 1,300 square feet. Packing school children from Nassau and Exuma, all the holiday vacationers who each year tried to get back to their jobs at the very last minute, people waiting to see them off or pick up expected passengers, airport staff, a handful of people departing on a foreign carrier, and you'd get the picture. Attention Bahamas Air passengers, I began. I moistened my lips and cleared my throat to eliminate the cracking. I waited for the noise to diminish. Flight 340 has departed Nassau and will arrive in 5 minutes. All passengers for Nassau are asked to ensure that you have your tickets handy. Bahamas Air has a second flight for passengers to Exuma, which will be arriving in 1 hour. As the rubble of resumed conversations began to accelerate, I forced myself to finish the announcements, which included appreciation for choosing our carrier and New Year well wishes. People often lose interest in an announcer the second after the bit of information that interests them is given. I felt a bit rejected by the dismissal. Then again, how would they know the person that had held their attention captive for 30 seconds was struggling to keep her head up and look them in the eye? They didn't know. They didn't care. They had their own issues. This was mine. I replaced the mouthpiece and returned to our office. My co-worker Sharon placed a warm hand over mine as soon as I sat down. Tiffany, you okay? Yeah, I'm holding up, I answered, already feeling better by her concern. Sharon had been my closest and only friend since joining the airline 7 years ago. I can't believe I buried my mother 2 weeks ago. I still feel so lost and also angry. I don't know why I'm angry except that my mother seemed to have lived a very uneventful, unfulfilled life. Maybe that was just the life she was meant to live, Sharon said. Really, Sharon? Do you really think we're just put here to exist, take up space, and then just die? That's it? It's really not that bad, Tiff. She had you and her church, and she loved you so much. I loved her too, always will. But I just feel angry that she wasn't allowed to love longer. And while she was alive, she went on like she really didn't have much of a life to live. Well, I'm proud that you got through your first announcements back on the job. Get ready, girl. It's going to be a long day. I'm going to the snack shop. Want a hot dog? Sharon got up and headed out the tiny office. Yeah, thanks. And get me a Coke too, please. As I looked at the meal I had chosen for breakfast, something hit me in the pit of my stomach. I realized the root cause of the anger that had been festering inside me for the past few weeks. I was angry at the junk I was putting in my body, the same junk my mother had put in her body all her life, and the reason she had died at 43. I was 25 years old, 5'5", and weighed 230 pounds. Diet and exercise had never been a big part of my life. As my mother had written notes for me when I wanted to conveniently be sick during Thanksgiving, she also wrote notes that I couldn't attend PE classes because the sun had a negative effect on me. I grew up watching my single mother, who had gotten pregnant at 18 by a man she barely knew, and who had conveniently left town before I was born, use food for comfort in every situation. After her death, I began to question for the first time whether my mother had had any hopes and dreams for her future. Was she in love with my father, and his rejection caused her to give up on a more meaningful life? Was the early death of her parents the beginning of her eating disorder? Would my mother's early death eventually kill me? I looked down at the pasty white bread splattered with all the condiments available, oil oozing out of the beef hot dog, the ice-cold carbonated soda to wash it all down, and I began to feel sick. Still, I ate it. By the time I arrived home that night, I really was sick. The day had been worse than anticipated. The flight from Exuma had been late, which caused a domino effect on some of the other flights. 2 of the school children from the Exuma flight had gotten into a fight in the terminal. As usual, the police officer who was supposed to be on duty at the airport had to cover for another officer at the main office in town. The airport authorities were doing quite well in controlling the situation themselves, until the relatives of the students, most of whom had been partying to bring in the new year, got involved, accelerating the confrontation. Getting that under control and the staff back to working mode took 2 hours. After the chaos, someone had pushed a chocolate bar in my hand as a thank you for pushing to get them the last available seat on the plane. I had welcomed the soft, gooey sweetness as the adrenaline rushed over me. It's Monday, and that meant pea soup and dumplings from my favorite takeout place. I can't remember a Monday where my shift included lunchtime when I passed on the Monday special. The aroma alone was enough to make my mouth water. Even if I were ever to muster up the courage to pass on it, I'm sure the person sitting next to me, spooning down the thick broth loaded with salt beef, conch, and the backbone of a land crab, in addition to other fillers, would have been enough for me to wrestle them to the ground for. I stumbled into the bathroom and threw up. Then, drained in tears, I ran a long hot bath while I sipped on ginger tea. I closed my eyes between sips and laid my head against the cool porcelain tub. The house was so quiet. I had lived alone for a few weeks, but it felt like it had been years. In a silence, there came a strength I never knew I had. I decided to fight for my life. My mother had worked as a maid at the Cotton Bay Club until it closed in 1994. After that, she worked odd jobs until I graduated from P.H. Albury High School and began an internship with Bahamas Air. College had never been an option. There was no money to pay for it, and my shy demeanor kept me from advancing my GPA to attain a scholarship. I had applied to 3 different local departments and took the first one that called. My mother never worked after my employment and spent her days in front of the TV. Dinner was always on the table when I got home, and it was always more for comfort than nourishment. My mother never dated either, nor expressed any interest in it. She went to church every Sunday, where she played the piano. On Wednesday nights, she attended Bible study. On the rare occasion that I was off on a Sunday, I would go out to service with her. But Mom didn't care either way. She didn't care much about anything really. By the time she was diagnosed with diabetes, it was already too late. Yet she stayed in denial about what she needed to do. I didn't need a doctor to tell me I was headed down the same road, nor did I need one to tell me I needed to get off it. The next day at work, I was clothed with the determination to change my life. But I knew it wouldn't be as simple as saying it out loud in front of the mirror. I knew everything wouldn't happen right away. I had to make small, realistic steps. I was now overweight, but I estimated that in 6 months I could be a healthy 160 pounds by losing 2 or 3 pounds each week. "Hey Tiff, hot dog for you?" Sharon asked the next morning after the flight departed. "No, get me an egg and cheese, and ask Kayla if she has any whole wheat bread, please." Sharon was already halfway out of the office when I spoke, but she froze in her tracks. She turned slowly and regarded me as if I were an alien just landed. "What, no juicy hot dog today?" "No, I need the protein from the eggs and the fiber from the whole wheat bread." "Oh, and can you get me an herbal tea too? New year, new rules." See, somewhere there was common sense beneath all the cobwebs in my head. I knew these health tips without even studying for it. Imagine how much more information I could get from research. Sharon ordered the same breakfast as she always had, but I didn't say anything to her. I had just woken up with my new revelation, therefore in no position to preach to her about changing her life. Besides, Sharon was much taller than I was and weighed much less. I had my concerns over her health nevertheless, but I needed to make sure I was putting one of my own large feet in front of the other first. Tomorrow I would be working the afternoon shift. I decided to purchase a pair of tennis shoes that afternoon. I planned to begin my exercise routine in the morning. Daylight came before 6:30. I felt invigorated and full of life as I crawled out of bed, slipped on an old pair of sweats and my brand new white tennis shoes. There didn't seem to be any signs of life except the roosters crowing in the yard. I did a few minutes of stretching and headed out at a brisk pace. In 5 minutes, my legs began to feel sore. There was tightness in what was supposed to be my calves. Another 10 minutes and I decided to turn around and head back home. So 15 minutes one way, 15 back. That gave me a full half hour. I patted myself on the back when I arrived home out of breath. I wanted to drop right into bed. My body was telling me it didn't like this. But I decided to make some cereal for breakfast and begin my online research to a healthier lifestyle. By the time I drove to the office, I had printed 5 pages of health facts, which I browsed over during breaks. I also had a full week meal plan written down and would stop at the supermarket after work to shop for the items. I suppose now I had a little extra money without having my mother to support. But it killed me that I hadn't thought of meal plans years ago, and we hadn't done this together. That week I implemented my plans and things looked great. It was hard work, but each time I got discouraged, I would think about my mother. I walked for a half hour, 5 days a week, either morning or evening depending on my schedule. I had a big healthy breakfast, big lunch, and small dinner. I ate fruit, vegetables, and yogurt every day, whether it tasted good or not. I included 6 glasses of water a day and completely cut out my daily soda. If I decided to have juice, it was always 100% juice. I also decided not to buy a scale just yet. I could use the machine for weighing luggage in the airport terminal, which was what I was on 2 weeks later, when I turned in surprise at the sound of giggles coming from Sharon. "Girl, get off that thing before you break it. What are you trying to prove? You cut out a couple of hot dogs and think you've lost weight? You can't lose weight that quickly." My cheeks became flushed, and for once I was happy that I was dark-skinned, which I'm sure hid my embarrassment. There were 2 porters seated in the lounge, as well as the agents for other airlines and my boss. They all laughed at Sharon's comments. I felt tears suddenly spring to my eyes. Sharon knew I wasn't a very popular girl. Why would she point out the obvious like that in front of everybody? I got off the scale without looking down to see what it said, gave a weak smile to no one in particular, and walked into the office. Sharon came in a few minutes later with a sheepish grin. "Tiff, I was just joking. You know that, right?" "Yeah, whatever," I said. The phone rang then, and I picked it up, grateful for the distraction. When I exited the office a few minutes later, I could still see the pity beneath the laughter in everybody's eyes. Sharon brought me a chocolate bar later in the day, stuffing it in my bag before she left. For the first time in 7 years, I was happy to be on duty without Sharon. When I got home that night, I took the chocolate bar and placed it at the back of the refrigerator. I went to bed with a heavy heart. When I woke up the next morning to the sounds of rain pouring down the rooftops, beating against the windows, I took it as a sign that I had been fooling myself. The humiliation of yesterday, then the rain this morning, was the universe telling me that I was fighting a losing battle. The only difference I felt in my body was the aches and pain I seemed to constantly be in, to the point where simply moving was cause for cramps and stiffness. This was too hard. The rainy weather lasted 3 consecutive days. After the 4th day without exercise, I came home and headed for the fridge, intending to dig out the chocolate bar. But something kept me from it. I looked outside and noticed the sun hadn't quite set yet. Maybe I could get in a few minutes' walk. I quickly put on my sweats and tennis shoes and headed out. The walk seemed even more difficult after the absence, yet I pressed on, allowing my mind to rid itself of all the clutter of the day. I began to relax. All of a sudden, I was feeling better. I smiled a little. Then someone was walking up behind me. "Good evening," he said as he passed me, giving a little smile that caused my heart to skip a beat. "Good evening," I answered him, already a few paces ahead of me. I had never seen him before, but man, he was fine. He was at least 6'3" and had big bulging muscles in his arms and legs, and his face wasn't half bad either from what I had glimpsed. I shook myself back to my senses and turned to head home. What a delusional fool I must be to foster ideas about someone like him. A love life in any sense of the word was out of the question. I could barely pull myself out of bed without panting. Imagine me trying to put myself into a love embrace. Despite what a lot of Bahamian men seem to relish about big women having more to love, I knew fat wasn't sexy. But seeing the handsome hunk had given me the burst of inspiration I needed. I wasn't doing this to be attractive to the opposite sex. I was trying to lose the weight in an effort to get healthy. I was doing this for my mom and for myself. Love wasn't the pot of gold at the end of my rainbow. Life was. A month after I started my new lifestyle, I took out the scale I had ordered from Avon, placed it on the floor of my bathroom, and stepped on. I was afraid to look down, and even when I did, I had to lean over with my knees pushed back so I could see the digital readout through the glass. I had lost 6 pounds. I got off the scale, waited for it to clear, and stepped on again. I had lost 6 pounds. It was only 6 pounds, but it was 1 pound more than the bag of rice I used to go through in no time at all. It was 4 pounds away from 10 pounds, and I knew that after losing 10 pounds, I would be able to actually see some difference. I stood in the bathroom for a full 5 minutes, both elated and scared. I wanted to see what I looked like with my clothes off. I hadn't looked at myself in a full-length mirror in years, except for the unfortunate times when I walked past a glass door at the airport or when approaching the entrance to an office building. I didn't have a full-length mirror at home. What would 2 obese women need a full-length mirror for? I could literally lift up the fat on my body and see it. I got dressed and walked out of the bathroom. As my program encouraged, I could reward myself a little after each triumph. I went to the refrigerator for the chocolate bar Sharon had given me and ate it as a reward for the lost weight. A major key in changing to a better lifestyle was not to deny myself all of the things I loved, but to cut down on the amount I ate and when I ate it. The earlier I indulged in something unhealthy meant that by bedtime, my body would have broken it down. I ate the chocolate bar and a healthy breakfast, gave myself an extra douse of perfume, and walked out the door. By the end of the 2nd month of my new regime, I was seeing noticeable changes. My clothing didn't fit so snug anymore, and I needed to add an extra loop in the belt I wore to work. My waistline was definitely a few inches smaller. My thighs seemed to shrink, as well as my arms. But there was nothing more satisfying than seeing the fat begin to decrease around my stomach. I had learned this was the most likely, yet most dangerous place for a woman to carry fat. I had begun to do stomach crunches in addition to my diet and exercise. I started out with 25 abdominal crunches, which increased to 50 by the next week. My walking routine, which had started out as half an hour, had increased to 45 minutes. All my meal portions were reduced by half. I had also implemented more frequent meals, which meant I had a snack mid-morning and mid-afternoon, consisting of fruit or yogurt, and I never ate or drank anything 2 hours before bedtime. It was apparent that not only was I seeing noticeable changes in my body, other people began to notice them as well. I was sitting on the bench outside the terminal one Monday afternoon, having lunch, when I got my first positive compliment. Yes, I did have the Monday special, and the soup was delicious. But I requested that no salt beef be put in, instead substituted with extra conch and crab. I also asked for just 1 dumpling and had more cassava and carrot substituted. But my biggest change was, right after I received my order, I placed half of it in a Tupperware I had brought to work just for this purpose. I would take the extra soup home and have it for breakfast the next morning. I was feeling pretty proud of myself when Lester, one of our porters, sat down next to me with his styrofoam soup container. "Boy, this soup tastes good, eh?" he said as he licked his spoon and rolled his eyes in satisfaction. I laughed as I agreed with him. imagining how the leftovers would taste even better in the morning. Yeah, they never miss on the soup, I agreed. Some people told me today that they fly in on Mondays so they could get the soup special. This famous, Lester continued. Wow, that's great, I said. I knew that visitor satisfaction was very important, especially to the porters. Did you guys work late yesterday? I asked. Yeah, boy, we didn't leave here until 9 last night, and we ain't even getting the overtime pay. I thought slavery was finished. Ain't that something? I asked sympathetically. The porters were the ones who were really overworked, as the agents worked shifts and were able to get more time off. But the porters usually worked all day on the days they were scheduled, never leaving the airport except to make quick runs into the nearby towns. Maybe you guys should write a petition against it and have the company agree to pay you overtime, I suggested. You know nothing changed around here. We could write 100 petitions and we still wouldn't get paid. Ain't no one even complaining 'cause nobody listening. But speaking of change, girl, what you doing to lose weight? You look good. I couldn't believe Lester was actually giving me a compliment. He wasn't a mean person or anything, and we had always gotten along well at work, but I had never really gotten a compliment on my looks that wasn't riddled with pity or followed by, for a big dark girl. Thanks, Lester. I've lost over 20 pounds by being really disciplined about everything in my life, and it is paying off. Lester studied me appreciatively for a while before pushing a chunk of conch into his mouth and sucking on it. After he had swallowed it, he turned to me again and spoke in a lowered voice. So what happened? You and Sharon ain't friends no more? I didn't really know how to respond to that. I knew the workplace was a cesspool for gossip and that rumors spread quicker than the flu virus in our town, and I didn't want to say anything negative about Sharon. After all, she had been my one and only friend since I began working for the airline. I'm just focused on trying to lose the weight and get healthy, and she has been busy with other things. That's all, I responded. Still, if my best friend was doing something to better herself, I would help her out, not cut her off. Boy, when God starts to bless you, that's when you know who your true friend is. His words cut right through me. I pondered them in silence while we finished our soup. I had a bottle of water as Lester cracked open a can of soda and drank it in 2 gulps. Then we both got up to go back into the office. I decided on the spur of the moment to break out of my shy shell and stick my neck out. It was what seemed only fitting after Lester had given me such insightful information. Lester, why don't you try the diet and exercise routine yourself? You could lose the weight. You will feel much better and have less health problems later down the road. Man, I can't diet and exercise. I love my gut too much, and then I'd just be too tired after work to exercise more than the up and down I do here. Well, how long do you want to live? Didn't you have to take off 3 weeks over the Christmas holiday because your blood pressure rose way above normal? Lester looked at me and laughed, but I could tell he was scared. He was also lazy, as I had been. But not only did he have a pregnant wife of whom he was the sole provider, he had various loans that made his ability to continue working for a long time of utmost importance. Look, Lester, let's go on the scale and see what we're dealing with, and then we can take it from there, okay? Okay, he said with a shrug. Lester was shocked at how much he weighed, but it slapped him into the reality of what he was faced with. I began to give him tips on what he needed to do, but I went a step further and contacted his wife, telling her how she could help Lester by preparing healthier meals for him, encouraging him to exercise, and using words of praise to stimulate his advancements. By the 4th month, I had a full following around the airport. Even some people at the church I attended began to follow suit, or at least encourage me in my venture. Kayla, the snack shop owner, began to implement small changes in the things she sold, and I printed posters for the notice board to encourage a healthier lifestyle. I was in the office one day organizing a staff walkathon when Sharon came in and sat down next to me. "Hey Tiff, you looking really good these days." "Thanks, Sharon. It's been really hard and lots of times I'm discouraged and want to give up. But then I think about my mother, and now I have these people who are looking up to me as a role model, and it feels good to be having that effect on people, you know." "Yeah, I know. I wish I had been more supportive of you through it all. I left you high and dry when you really needed a friend." Sharon's face was wrinkled with shame and remorse. "Why did you do it, Sharon?" I asked. At first I thought it was because I was jealous, that I wouldn't be the fine one when we walked out of the office together. I actually took comfort in the fact that I would look better depending on whom I was with. She swallowed. She knew her words had cut deep. I had never thought for a second that I could ever look as good as Sharon, no matter how much weight I lost. But I was crushed that she had been using me for years to make herself look better. That was really hurtful. That may have been the truth in the beginning, Tiff, but I really was afraid that you wouldn't want to be with me anymore after you got trim and fabulous, and other people wanted to be your friend. I mean, all you talked about for the last few months was diet and exercise, all the things you shouldn't eat. It took all the fun out of being with you, and I also thought you began to find we didn't have so much in common anymore. But I really should have been supporting you. And who says I can't use a few health changes?" "Yeah, you can," I said, laughing with her. "I will never outgrow you, Sharon. We can grow together. I love you, girl. You're all I have left in the world." I gave Sharon a big hug. It felt so good to be back with my friend. I hadn't even realized how much I had missed her during this journey. But it wasn't over yet. I still had 2 more months to go and a lifetime of maintenance after that. Sharon would be there for it all. We were walking together one evening when the hunk passed us. As his iron-like butt got farther and farther ahead, Sharon and I simultaneously, without saying a word to each other, began to speed up. What more motivation did we need to work harder? We never caught up with him, but it became a frequent thrill on our walking sessions. One time, the hunk turned around and waved at us, a big smile on his face, as he broke out into a trot, leaving us in the distance. In 6 months, I had lost 70 pounds. I stood in front of the full-length mirror I had bought 2 weeks ago, admiring my naked body for the first time in my life. I looked so beautiful on the outside, but more importantly, I felt healthy. I felt alive. The end. Look for a follow-up story in December 2010 when Tiffany Clark gets something extra special for Christmas. And the review for this particular story was written by Abigail Johnson, who is a teacher, and Abigail says, "I always enjoy stories of personal triumph. This is truly a story of someone who looks within themselves to find the motivation, determination, and strength to make changes. New year, new rules is a godsend for many Bahamians, young and old. It wakes us up to all the health pitfalls that are associated with obesity because of our diet and lack of exercise. I am motivated to put on my sneakers and start hitting the pavement." Okay, that's it, guys. I know that was long, but as always, if you've enjoyed this, please share the video, please comment, and please purchase the book. This book is available on Lulu. It's available in Greencastle, and it's also available at locations in Nassau. So please let me know if you're interested. Thank you so much for your support.